this section, we'll be discussing emotional and social development in emerging adulthood. One of the most important aspects of emotional and social development in this stage of life is finding a loving relationship. In fact, Erikson says that the psychological conflict of early adulthood is intimacy versus isolation, and this is reflected in the young person's thoughts and feelings about making a permanent commitment to an intimate partner. So maturity here involves balancing the desire for self-determination with the desire for intimacy. A secure identity fosters the attainment of intimacy. So for both men and women, identity achievement is positively correlated with fidelity and love, while identity moratorium, so a state of searching prior to commitment, is negatively associated with fidelity and love. For women, the coordination of identity and intimacy is a little bit more complex than it is for men, because women are more likely to consider the impact of their personal goals on important relationships. So for this reason, we see that for some women, Erikson's stage of identity versus role confusion, and then intimacy versus isolation, it doesn't necessarily go in that order. So some middle-aged women who go to college for the first time may have actually done intimacy versus isolation before really achieving identity versus role confusion. So Erikson believed that successful resolution of intimacy versus isolation prepares the individual for the middle adulthood stage. And this next stage is focused on generativity, so caring for the next generation and helping to improve society. So hopefully what you can see here is that your area of focus is changing as you develop. So when you're in adolescence, for example, you're focused on achieving your identity, you're focused on yourself. As you move into early adulthood, you're focused on achieving an identity with another person. So you're focused on you and someone else. And then finally, by middle adulthood, you are focused on creating a very broad identity, a way that you can give back to the whole world. So Robert Sternberg's triangular theory of love identifies intimacy, passion, and commitment as components of romantic relationships that shift in emphasis over time. So passion is that intense physiological desire for another person. Intimacy is the sense that you can share everything, your thoughts and your actions, with another person. Commitment is the willingness to stay with that person through life's vicissitudes. So this is really your rich or poor, in sickness and in health. So passion, intimacy, and commitment are the key components of love, and these can be used to understand how relationships develop. Now, a true love relationship will have all three of these components. What we see is that couples are happier when each feels the same type of love to a similar degree. The longer a relationship lasts, the lower its intimacy and passion, but the greater its commitment. So let's talk more about love through adulthood. Early in romantic relationships, passion is usually very high, but intimacy and commitment tend to be low. So infatuation is very intense. This is where there's this physically based relationship in which the two people have a high risk of misunderstanding and jealousy. So typically infatuation is short-lived, and as the length of the relationship increases, intimacy and passion decrease, but commitment increases. So there are higher divorce rates in couples who marry based primarily on infatuation. So how do people choose mates? Do you think that it's more birds of a feather flock together or opposites attract? Well, really the best explanation of the process of how people fall in love is explained by the theory of assortative mating. And this theory states that people select mates based on their similarity to each other. So assortative mating is this idea that you select your partner based on similarity across many dimensions. We prefer people whose IQs, personalities, values, attitudes, abilities, ambitions, and beliefs are similar to our own. Familiarity here plays a big role. We tend to like things that are familiar. So when we meet new people, we actually tend to gravitate to people whose last names begin with the same letter as ours. Propinquity is this idea that the physical proximity of people involved play a role. So now the boy next door has really made it. There is some study done where people were randomly assigned to college dorms. So if it's random assignment, it's not based on anything. And despite this random assignment, individuals still reported having more friendships from their own dorm. So on some level that life will be easier if you like the people around you. So you make more of an effort to get to know them. We know that even mere exposure plays a role. The more you see people, the more you tend to like them. And this happens whether we know it's occurring or not. So homogamy is this idea that the pool of available people to meet is strongly shaped by the opportunities available. And that in turn constrains the type of people that you're likely to meet. So homogamy is this idea that the degree to which people are similar is going to be greater when couples meet through a school or religious setting. So take a minute and think about what you're looking for in your future mate. Try to come up with maybe your top 3 qualities that you're looking for. So we do see that there are some gender differences. Intimate partners generally meet in places where they're likely to find people of their own age, ethnicity, SES, and religion. People usually select partners who resemble themselves in attitudes, personality, educational plans, intelligence, and physical attractiveness. The one difference here is we see is with personality. So if they have a complementary, so not necessarily opposite, but complementary personality. Maybe one person's a little bit more outgoing and the other person's a little bit more reserved, that complements each other. And so we see that there are differences in male and female criteria for choosing a partner, and these really reflect an evolutionary perspective. So women will choose more masculine-looking men for shorter-term relationships, but when it comes to that longer-term relationship, they actually choose more feminine-looking men. So women, they're seeking a mate with traits such as earning power or emotional commitment. Basically, when we look at this through an evolutionary lens, we see that they're seeking someone who is going to help to ensure children's survival and well-being. So basically for women, they're choosing more feminine-looking men because they think that those men are more likely to stick around. So what happens to a woman? Well, if she gets pregnant, right, she's basically off the market for more than 9 months because, it takes a while for her period to return. And so she needs someone who's going to stand by her side, who's going to provide for that child, even though she is already pregnant. Men are looking for a mate with traits that signal youth, health, sexual pleasure, and the ability to give birth to and care for offspring. So the idea here, you guys, evolutionary psychology says that you look for traits that help ensure the survival of your own genes. So for a woman, she needs someone who's going to stand by her. For a man, he just wants to continue to reproduce to spread his genes, basically. This is the idea behind evolutionary psychology. So it makes sense then that a man is going to look for someone who, with traits that signal, yes, I can carry your child. So the choice of an intimate partner and the quality of an intimate relationship are definitely influenced by the timing and by memories of early parent-child bonding. So we're going to talk more about attachment and how that plays a role here in just a second. We do see that research shows that men and women in various cultures display unique orderings of their preferences concerning the ideal characteristics of a mate. But we see that the characteristics of a desirable mate, when it comes to more like traditional cultures, for example, they're going to emphasize chastity and homemaking in women and ambition, industry, and financial prospects in men. Western cultures will value these qualities to a much lesser extent, and nearly all cultures place importance on love and attraction. So the relative importance of education, intelligence, and social refinement in choosing a mate also differs culturally. But we see that there are certain things that are universally desirable. So for men, physical attractiveness. For women, being that the man is a good provider. In both genders, it's important that people find someone who they love, they're mutually attracted to, they can depend on, emotionally stable, they're kind, and they're understanding.